One of the best parts of fantasy baseball is the allure of the prospect. You never know what you're going to get. It could be anything. It could be one of the most amazing players of all time. It could be an absolute dud. Today, we dive into the world of Dynasty when it comes to fantasy baseball on today's action-packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we're your number one source for fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Dominic Martino, here as always with my brother, my co-host, my partner in crime, Matthew Adne. As you can see if you're watching on YouTube, and if you are watching on YouTube and you haven't already, hit that little bell below. It's going to subscribe you to the channel and give you a notification every time we drop a new episode. Or if you're listening on the audio side of things, once again, please make sure you're subscribed. And if you're listening on a platform like Apple or Spotify that allows 5-star ratings and reviews, we would truly appreciate it if you could do that for us as well. And lastly, but what's going to help you guys win your fantasy baseball league, especially this time of year when the playoffs are right around the corner, is joining Matt and I on the Insider's Track. Listen, there's still a lot of top prospects. We're going to talk about a bunch of them today. When they get called up, you will get an instant text message notification going right to your phone. No one else in the industry is offering that. And when we do our waiver wire episodes, we will rank those guys for you and tell you how you should prioritize them when you're picking them up. And once again, you're going to get all of that on the Insider's Track. Join us today. Link is in the bio wherever you're listening or watching, and it's available on any of our social media platforms. And all right, Matt, let's get into it. Interesting episode. Matt, I'm going to let you take the wheel from here, my brother. So let the people know, what are we doing today over here?
All right. So essentially we have a different path, which I think this is going to be a good weekly episode, right? So you may feel like, okay, you're out and, it's time to just stop looking at fantasy baseball soon because there's no statistical way to make the playoffs. But that's not true in certain leagues, right? Like, how do I make 2026 a successful year, being that 2025 was not my year? And there's things that you do in preparation for, for the next year, right? Like, okay, how do I get prospects? What are the guys I'm targeting? What guys on my team are going to be dead weight that are losing value, that still have value this year that I could possibly move away? On top of that, what guys can we kind of, see, okay, is there anybody on my team that I really should be holding or paying attention to or trying to acquire? And these are things that we got to do because, in redraft leagues, for instance, right? Redraft leagues, your trade deadline is gone. In dynasty leagues, trade deadline runs all the way to essentially the playoffs, right into the last day of the playoffs, and then right after the playoffs, then it goes again. So it's time to really dig in on the dynasty leagues, and in some of the keeper leagues too. You could prep for that as well. It's still relevant, but your trade deadlines are probably already came and gone. But at the same time, who am I stashing for next year or things like that? And these are the key things we got to start looking at. And this is the perfect time to get into it. Let's start off. So this is more of a dynasty kind of type deal for these three guys, but Marcell Ozuna, Justin Verlander, and Max Scherzer. Three older players that I think have reached I want to say, grandfather years. They definitely are on the way to have grandchildren themselves. But Marcell Ozuna obviously having a very down year. Justin Verlander obviously, completely, I say, irrelevant at this point. And Max Scherzer, a guy who I think still has some value, but maybe not this year. So it's interesting that I say that, but you look at what maybe Max Scherzer has and how he started off spring and how I think injury really derailed his season. If he comes back next year, which is a question, does he retire next year? If he comes back next year, is he worth holding on to or is he worth trading away? So for me, if I'm in a position of winning and he's on my dynasty team in 2026, looks like the outcome I'm doing just as good as I'm doing in 2025, and I have a strong team, then I might want to hold on to Scherzer and see if we can what spring brings before I just, cut bait with him and move on. Whereas like, okay, do I have him on my team and I don't really have a good 2025 and I'm in 2026 off season, for instance, do I trade him away? And the answer is yes. You try and get whatever you can for an older guy if you're not in a position to win, right? The difference, there's two phases of dynasty. There's the rebuild, and then there is I'm going to win a championship. And they're two different outlooks. So Scherzer might be a guy you're trying to win with, and if you're not in a position to win, you're going to trade away. The other two, Verlander specifically, I don't even think he's playing next year, and if he does, I don't even care. Ozuna, he's worth an acquire if you're in a winning position, in my opinion. He's a guy I want to try and acquire in the offseason, in a dynasty league specifically, to see if he still has any fuel left in the tank. You don't just drop off this hard after coming off a 38 home run season with, batting like, and this is off the top of my dome, I think like 280 or some change in 2024, having a really good season where he was drafted as a top 12 outfield this year, to this kind of putrid season. And, there's falling off a cliff, and then there's literally nosediving off the cliff. And, I don't think that the nosedive has actually happened. There's definitely something different about this year in him. And I don't think it's age. So he's a guy I might try and take an upside swing that is going to be super cheap. So if I'm in a position to win, I might try and acquire him. Dom, how do you feel about this group?
I think you hit the nail on the head, especially with these three guys. I'm gonna kind of vibe off of what you said. So when it comes to dynasty leagues, right, specifically, Matt, three great names. I think you're looking at players 30, 31, 32. When you get to that sort of, age, those players take a bit of a dip. There's a bunch of different names we can go over. We can sit and talk about them. I think when you get to that point in time, most players, there are the exceptions, guys who age with grace, but most, I'd say 90% of players, when you get to that point in time, it's supposed to be a full-blown dynasty league where you're keeping your whole roster. Players of that age, you start to want to move on from. You want to start to think about, hey, can I trade these players and get younger? On the other side of it, you want to say 25 and younger. When you look at names like that, Matt, I'm actually gonna let's talk about some of these guys that you have up here. Yuri Perez, Caminero, Nick Kurtz, Chase Burns. 4 great names that are very young, that you still want to go out there and acquire guys like that. Even I'll give you another guy I love, Michael Harris, who's like 24 years old, having a big second half. Guys like that are still super young. You kind of want to go out and get guys like that, acquire those names where you can. Obviously, it is tougher in Dynasty, but even if you can get 23, 24-year-olds, those are great guys that, still going to give you production for years to come, especially when you're keeping your whole roster. You want to go out there. I know it's going to be tough in a Dynasty league to go out there and get a Caminero or Kurtz, but maybe a Michael Harris, like I said, is 24. You want to look at guys maybe 25 that are still going to give you maybe 3 to 4 guaranteed, solid years. And age has a lot to do with it when it comes to Dynasty, when you're not really accounting for age in a redraft league. When you're coming into a league like that, you really just want to go out there most of the time, get the best talent on the board, whether it's an Ozuna, who's, older, or Mike Trout, who's getting older, guys like that. When in Dynasty, you want to start looking into the prospects and do the McGonagalls, and names like that. But before we move on and get even deeper into this conversation with Dynasty and redrafts leagues, we're going to take a quick break. And all right, guys, I want to talk to you about my friends over at Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head over to a ball game with your friends or family? Maybe it's the game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on the tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, and even invite a bigger group of people to come with you, Game Time makes it possible, just to get all of that done easily. So when you're, using Game Time, buying those tickets, fast and simple. The prices on the app are actually going to drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals as well. Clear seat views and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse through the app for any exciting upcoming MLB game. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Game Time's Zone Deals picks the best seats in your section for you. So it's literally super easy. And then, with their seat views right in the app before you buy, you're going to know exactly where you're sitting. So, it's literally perfect. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets and the lowest price is always guaranteed. And, guys, once again, it's such a tough time of year, especially being a sports fan, right? Your fantasy football leagues are, probably getting ready to draft soon. And, you're super excited about football like most of us sports fans are. But you can't forget about your fantasy baseball league, and Matt and I are going to make it super easy for you to not forget and win your fantasy baseball league by joining the Insider's Track. Matt and I are going to text you anytime a major prospect calls up. So, you got that little alert on your phone. Let me go pick up Kevin McGonigal, or any of these other big name prospects that might get called up. Bubba Chandler, at down the stretch here. Maybe get a little cup of coffee in September. So, join us on the Insider's Track. The link is going to be in the bio if you're listening, watching, or available on any of our social media platforms. And all right, Matt, before we went off here, and I was talking about some of these, younger players that we could potentially go out there and try and trade for in Dynasty. Matt, any names that you got out there that you potentially like in Dynasty leagues?
Yeah, let's change it a little bit too. Let's break it down. Let's go with the two hitters and two pitchers that we have, and let's just compare them side by side, and then kind of roll in, right? So let's start off with like Junior Caminero and Nick Kurtz, right? So these are two guys that are going to be very hard to obtain in Dynasty if you're trying to go out there and trade. And just know your value too. If you're a bad team and you have these guys, like you're clearly not selling away. Like these guys are young, like real young, like babies still in the womb, kind of type deal. And you're not going to trade those whatsoever. Those are the guys you're going to try and target. So if you have an older stud like a Harper or a Turner, things like that, and you're not in a position to win, these are the names I'm honestly asking for. Hey, you have a Nick Kurtz, he's freshly called up. Hey, like, look, I'm going to trade multiple studs to go out and get this young guy on my team so I can build for the future. So like you're not just going ahead and just like, saying, okay, I'm not getting anything in return, like, or a pick. Like, what's a pick going to do? You're going to wait on a prospect, for instance, to not only get on your team, get called up, then break out. Like, no, like you're trading away, for instance, a Bryce Harper, for instance. You're going to want to go out and get the young stud. So it's equivalent in production, but also somebody that's equivalent in value. And that's the thing, right? And what does that value speak of, right? Like the inconsistency that Nick Kurtz can kind of bring, maybe. I don't think I'm trading him at all in any format, but, I'm going to go out and try. But like, hey, there's that solitude of just having, Harper in the second half of the season going into your playoffs that I might want to trust more than Kurtz at this point. And I'm still getting a stud. It's just, okay, I have a shorter time of how long this player is going to be on my team. And I'm not keeping the reboot going, but I don't care. As the owner trading away Nick Kurtz, I'm the guy going out and just getting a more reliable to win the championship. But that's the only thing on my mind at this point. So that's the same thing with Caminero. Now, he's another guy that's going to be really hard to trade for. But at the same time, I'm trading these older studs and I'm trying to still have these guys by the time my team reboots. And that's the thing. If I trade away a Harper's maybe got like 2 years left in the tank of eliteness, and we're seeing somewhat of injuries getting in the way that's going to be the high-end talent that he is and get the production on an all-year-round standpoint. So trading these guys away, I'm going to get a return. Otherwise, I'm not going to get anything at all. So, I'll hold at that point. But you want to get guys that are going to be in their prime and still performing by the time your team gets out of the rebuild phase. It's not just prospects. I need a stud. I need a guy like this in return on top of the prospects and picks because they're all lottery tickets at that point. They're just scratch offs. You don't know who's going to hit. Even these top guys we're going to talk about in a little bit, we don't know what they're going to do. So you want to make sure you're getting that return.
Yeah, Matt, great take on Caminero and Kurtz. But I think kind of, as you said, those are going to be tough guys to go out there and acquire. I'll give you guys a couple of big name players I think you can go out there and get pretty cheap. Zach Neto having a monster season, 23 or 24 years old, still super, super young. That Angels team, I know they're not great right now. They got a couple of young prospects. They have potential to get a little bit better, but I think Zach Neto is going to be there for the long haul. 270 batting average this year, 74 runs, 21 homers, 54 RBIs, 22 steals, having a very, very strong season. I don't think you're going to have to pay a monster price for him in a dynasty league. So that's definitely a guy I think you can go out there and get very cheap on the on the dollar. Next guy might be a little bit tougher. He's probably one of the hottest hitters in baseball at the moment. It's Michael Harris, one of my boys. If you're familiar with the podcast, I love him. I talked about it earlier. If you went out there and bought on him, you got a hell of a deal because he's been fantastic in the second half. He's notoriously a second half hitter. So, 123 games played on the season. Even the season long numbers are starting to look really good. 260 batting average, 43 runs, 15 homers, 66 RBIs, 14 steals. He's still only, 24 years old, still super young. He's hitting 348 in the second half with 23 extra base hits, 23 RBIs, 25 runs, 3 steals. And that's over his last 41 games. So he's been pretty hot as well. Just 2 names I think you can go out there and get pretty cheap. Matt, I don't know if you want to talk about them at all, or if you just want to keep it pushing and, talk about some other guys you think we can go out there and get, or maybe take this episode in a different direction.
So I do want to talk about the Harrisness. So again, I'm going to whip out the haterade, just a little bit. So Harris is a big name that honestly, we all know if you're a fan of the show, I'm not a fan of. He comes with a high value. Yes, he's 24 years old, but he's a guy that you could trade away and get a lot. If I'm in a winning position, I have him on my team. Yeah, he's playing good for the second half, air quotes. If you're not watching on him, literally doing the air quote stuff on the side here. But I don't believe in that talent whatsoever. And the return I can get for Michael Harris could be actually great in terms of a dynasty aspect. I can get a bunch of guys that I think could either help me win now and fill holes and, leave that sucker with, pretty much a landmine and, be able to just improve my team as a whole and get daily contributors versus a guy that's been hot for a month and a half, essentially. I mean, yeah, he's hit 9 home runs in the second half, which is great. Look, he hit 6 in the month of August and 3 in the month of July. And yeah, he hit 301 and 408, but I mean, 148, 245, 233. That's great, bro. Good job. Like, I'm so glad you decided to turn it on. And is it sustainable? If I'm looking at the history, no, it's not. He's just having a hot month. And like, that's really it. He's making good contact. I don't trust him going into playoffs to win me a season and win my championship. He could fall off just like he's been his whole entire career. So it's great, but trade him away and fill holes, and you can get multiple guys that could contribute versus just one guy that I believe is going to fall off tomorrow. So, I'm really just that's just really where I stand on Michael Harris. And I think his value for a trade comes even higher. And that's where if I'm a guy and sitting in a top end spot looking to improve my team, that's the guy I'm really trying to move.
I don't want to do a whole Michael Harris debate, but you look at the back of the baseball card, he hit 293 as a rookie, almost 2020. He was hurt last year. I really don't count it. Having a monster second half, hitting 400 over his last 30 games with 8 homers and great counting stats. They moved him to 4th in the lineup. Ozuna's not going to be there forever. That lineup's still going to be good. I think Harris is just going to be a part of that team for the long haul. So whether you agree with Matt or I, it's up to you at this point. But we're not going to do a whole Michael Harris thing because we'll save that for another time in the offseason when we have the time to do it. But before we move on, and let's talk about some prospects. We'll do some prospect talk for Dynasty and other strategies for redraft and other stuff like that coming up next. And all right, Matt, let's do some of our favorite prospects that still might be available in your dynasty leagues. Matt, I don't know if I got one queued up. If you don't,
go for it.
We haven't talked about him too much, but one of the biggest movers in all of fantasy dynasty baseball Luis Pena, he is a infielder, plays short for those Milwaukee Brewers. One of the, like I said, he's up to the 16th prospect in all of baseball, ranked even higher in some dynasty formats. He's 18 years old, so he's still raw. 5'11", 185. He's not a big dude, but he's got a great hit tool. He's got a lot of speed. Let's give you his numbers. Down in the minors across 2 levels, I believe it's high A and A ball, 81 games, 300 batting average, 67 runs, 17 doubles, 6 triples, 9 homers, 61 RBIs, 33 walks to 54 strikeouts, and 42 steals. I picked Pena up in a couple of spots where I play in dynasty formats. I think he's going to be like a 300 type hitter, a lot of speed in that bat. Power, he could grow into it, but I don't see him being like a monster power guy, maybe at peak 20-ish home runs. But definitely somebody, if he's out there in your dynasty leagues, been one of the biggest risers in all of the like I said, the dynasty world. Somebody you got to watch out for. As an 18-year-old, just to be doing what he's doing, in high A is, pretty impressive. Batting average is taking a little dip since he's got there, hitting 250 in high A. But it's only over 10 games, so small sample size. But he also has 3 homers in those 10 games, so starting to show off the power a little bit there. Just love to see what this kid could potentially do, a couple years from now.
Yeah, well said. A guy that I know you like, so I'm gonna just say you covered him really well, and I'm gonna move on, and I'm actually going to get kind of rinse and repeat somebody from last night, essentially. But I didn't talk about them from a dynasty perspective, and that's Jack Caglioni of the Kansas City Royals. Now, yeah, he's on the IL, but these are the perfect times to buy the dip. I don't mean to sound like a crypto guy or whatever, but it's one of those things where Caglioni, the value has seriously dropped. And this is what makes him obtainable in a dynasty league. This isn't a guy you're going to find out on your waiver wires. He was a top end prospect that was not even just raved about, was like a mouth-watering pick in dynasty startups and even in, when the draft classes are drafted, that's a guy you targeted and you wanted to walk away with in that draft over a Nick Kurtz, for instance. And, I still think there's another level to him because we saw it already. We've seen the production that this kid did, and you see that he thrusted himself onto the big league, stage. And quite honestly, in Dynasty, this is the perfect time to bounce. Take him away from a team that is honestly down, not feeling good, and make them an offer. You're going to have to give up something, but an offer that you're going to get him in return, and you're going to end up benefiting in the long run. Look, Dynasty is a lot different than it is from like a redraft or a keeper league, where you don't keep your whole entire lineup. Like when you're keeping your whole entire lineup, trying to capitalize on buying the dips and trying to capitalize on guys having doubts on them, because we've seen this story too, with these top end prospects. Like, I don't know, a Jordan Lawler who is performing really well in the minors that has been called up twice and hasn't really been able to get things going. Same thing with a Jared Kelenic, and we've seen, or Kelenic, or however we say his name, in the past. These guys could also be these turds, but I don't think Caglione is going to do it because we've seen the power and things like that. I think things just need to snap into place. And Dom's favorite phrase, development always isn't linear, and you want to just make sure you want to not just make a judge and say, okay, this is this kid's story and he's done. Because that might not be the case. So he's the perfect guy to target right now in dynasty leagues, especially if you're out of it. Let me give up a stud to go out and get Jack Caglioni, because I think that, okay, cool, the owner's a little bit pissed off, probably not getting the results, thought he was going to be a stud. Okay, cool, let me now offer him a carrot. And now, cool, I just got a guy that's great that my team isn't going to be ready for 2 years anyway, and that gives time for Caglioni to get on it. So I think it's the perfect move to be patient, but also to advance your team in the right direction.
Matt, I think that was actually such a smart way to talk about underperforming prospects from a dynasty standpoint, especially a Jack Caglioni who's struggled since he's got to the bigs. But he's down there right now in the minors, mashing, homer, doubled twice in his last game. If you could go out there and make that sneaky play before Jack Caglioni turns into a potentially Nick Kurtz type of player, you make that move. And I honestly, Matt, I would hope to think that most Dynasty League players are savvy. But if you play in a 12, 15-man league, is there a chance that the Jack Caglione owner isn't savvy and doesn't realize what they have in their hand? And they're like, sure, if you're going to give me a couple assets, maybe draft picks, stuff like that, that's a great way to go and capitalize. And that doesn't just apply to Caglione. It applies to any other top prospect that's underperforming or any younger player that's underperforming. You know, we're not going to do the whole Michael Harris thing again, but
no.
we're just going to use him as an example. A young player underperforming that has potential upside to be, an all-star caliber player. You go out there and you make that move 9 times out of 10, especially if it's a guy you believe in. I know Matt and I personally both believe in Caglione, so that's a guy you could definitely go out there and make a move for at the moment. Matt, go ahead. If you got something queued up, go for it.
Well, one last thing too. I just want to add to this thing and give you time to queue up your next guy. Is when it comes to Dynasty 2, a lot of the top end teams that are just trying to win championships love to dump prospects that aren't giving them an instant gratification, because I want to walk away with the money this year and win a World Series. Essentially, I don't care about next year at that point. So that is the teams that okay, look, if the one of the top 3 teams or top 5 teams have this player, that's the first guy I'm going to try and take it. If he's in a lower team that is not making the playoffs and sucks, you're not getting it off that team no matter what. But those higher end teams that are pretty loaded and looking to fill holes, perfect team to target. And perfect team to say, hey, I need it. Now, if on that team, I want to win now, I might also do it. Just on the other side, I might try and go leverage the hell out of him to a team that has a couple studs that could fill my holes to make me win a championship and not care about the next 2 years after the fact. So it's also weighing your assets on the other side. Do I sell to improve and win now? And, it's not just always acquiring and be like, oh my God, how could you trade him? Oh my God. No, you can. You could easily trade him because that guy has a stock price. And even with it being down, you will still get a lot. So it's worth it at the end of the day, especially if your team's not there, or if your team's in it, go fill those holes and go get that job done. That is exactly, you leverage your prospects to a point where you're able to use them as assets so that you get instant gratification, whether it's on the stat line or in the transaction field. But yeah, that's about it. I got to dip. Dom, rest for you.
Gotcha. All right, guys, I'm going to take it over from here. I got a couple more starting pitchers for you guys. Let's talk about Spencer Schwellenbach and Cole Ragans. 2 injured starting pitchers, who in dynasty formats are still young enough. Schwellenbach's 25. I think Ragans is around the same age. I'm going to fact check myself on that in a second because I do want to start here with Schwellenbach. All of the underlying stuff for Schwellenbach looks great. The injury, I don't think it's going to be anything to be worried about for the rest of his career or anything like that. If you can go out there and get a potential top 20 starting pitcher right now, for next year and Spencer Schwellenbach, I'd go out there and do it. His fastball is elite. Sits at about 97, gets up there even faster. He has a really good slider. His split finger is absolutely money. Just a young pitcher for, I think the Braves team is going to be good, going forward for, the next few years. You absolutely have to go out there and try and acquire a guy like Schwellenbach, who we were all really excited about coming into the year and, had finally started to find his stride before he got hurt. His last outing before Schwellenbach went down was against the Phillies on June 28th, went 7 strong, struck out 12, 1 earned run, got the win, was just really on his way, to be great. The elbow issue, like I said, not super worried about it. I don't think it's going to require surgery. They're saying that Schwellenbach, is probably not going to pitch for the rest of this season, but should be available going into the 2026 campaign. So if you can go out there right now and acquire him, I think that's a smart move. Let's talk about Cole Ragans real quick as well. Ragans has obviously been dealing with that shoulder issue. He's actually, been dropped in a lot of formats. Obviously, I don't think it's dynasty or keeper, but you know what, man, Ragans threw a 35 pitch bullpen session on Monday. He should be back before the end of the season. So I think right now, strike while the iron's hot. You go out there and get a Cole Ragans who's been, fantastic. Tough year this year, but I think he was dealing with the injury a lot longer than, we were led on to believe. Ragans is 27 years old, so a little bit older than Schwellenbach, but still young enough that he has time to be super productive. The 2024 season was monstrous for Ragans. It was 32 starts, a 3.14 ERA, 186 innings pitched, with 223 strikeouts, and he had a 114 whip to go with it. I think Ragans is somebody who's just, still getting better and growing as a pitcher. He, started to come on towards the later stages in his career, or, where he's at compared to where he's at now. Back when he was with the Texas Rangers, they really didn't do too much with him, work with him. Obviously, the Royals saw something there, went out and acquired him, and, Ragans has been great since being acquired, by the Royals. Gets a lot of whiffs, a lot of strikeouts. Doesn't really get hit too hard. So Ragans is somebody in the Dynasty format I'm trying to go out there and acquire. And by the way, if you're still here listening, you're probably a fan of ours. Michael Harris, kind of want to mention it, has been the 5th best player in all of fantasy baseball over the last month. So, Matt, you know what? You can kick rocks on the Michael Harris take, because you know what? I am a believer. So, you know what, guys? We're going to call it there. Shout out to our everydayers and new listeners for making Locked On Fantasy Baseball your first listen each and every day. But for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. So, guys, until next time, see ya.